One, two. Sakyam Maitrim Savidam Cha
Sakyam Maitrim Savidam
Dishu Samsmaran Sakyam Maitri Savidam Cha Dishu Samsmaran Rupam Agrajamityah Gadaya Vira Sakyam Maitrim Savidam Cha Dishu Samsmaran Rupam Agrajamityah Gadaya Vira Sakyam Maitrim Savidam Cha
Sakyam Maitrim Savidam
Dishu Samsmaran Sakyam Maitrim Saradam Cha Arityadishu Samsmaram Dipam Agrajam Ityaha Vagadgadaya Gira
Sakyam Maitrim Savidam Cha
Sakyam Maitrim Saradam Arityadishu Samsmaram Dipam Agrajam Ityaha Bashva Gadgadaya Gira Sakyam well-wishing Maitrim benediction Sahodam intimately related also Saratadishu in becoming the chariot driver Smaran remembering all these Rupam and to the king Agrajam the eldest brother Iti does Aha said Bashpa heavily breathing Gadgadaya overwhelmingly Gira by speeches the full Christ divine grace easy Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri. Remembering Lord Krishna and his well-wishes, benediction, intimate family relations, and his chariot driving. Arjuna, overwhelmed and breathing very heavily, began his purport. The Supreme Living Being is perfect in all relations with his pure devotee. Sri Arjuna is one of the typical pure devotees of the Lord, reciprocating in the fraternal relationship. And the Lord's dealing with Arjuna are displays of friendship of the highest perfect order. He was not only a well-wisher of Arjuna, but actually a benefactor. And to make it still more perfect, the Lord tied him into a family relationship by arranging Subhadra's marriage. And above all, the Lord agreed to become a chariot driver of Arjuna in order to protect his friend from warfare risks. And the Lord became actually happy when he established the Pandavas to rule over. Arjuna remembered all these one after another, and thus he became overwhelmed with such thoughts. तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणी निर्विशेषवादी आश्रम प्रदेश कृपा सिंधु एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे These things also that you can understand the certain reality you are allowed through the words of Lord Jesus. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Today morning, we're discussing the first major pastime in the Bhagavatam, where we take off largely in the mood of the Bhagavatam with the characters that are also present in the Bhagavatam. It is part. So here, if we visualize the situation, what has happened? That this is the majestic kingdom of Krishna. Huge palace. So old. Great Yajnas is the unrivaled ruler of the world. And it is in his palace that Arjuna is coming. Krishna is probably sitting on a eager to see Arjuna. We see Arjuna, his anxiety increases. What is happening? And Arjuna is coming. Arjuna is going to be disheveled. Arjuna is going to be disheartened. Arjuna is utterly devastated. The contrast between the majesty of the surroundings and the misery of the people cannot be more stark. Arjuna is completely shattered as he's coming after a long, troubled journey. Somehow he's dragged himself back to his spirit. And he's trying to explain what has happened. Generally, whenever the emotions become too strong, that can take us to a disconnect between our thoughts and our speech. So, for some people, when they get angry, like that, it's and that tongue goes into fast forward before their brain has even woken up. And then they speak things which they like. So now sometimes the emotions become so strong that before we think we start speaking. And sometimes the emotions become so strong that we get so caught in the thoughts that we can't speak. So both ways it happens. Normally there are our thoughts and there are our words. And there is a link between. Now, ideally speaking, normally thoughts go much faster, words go slightly slower. But there is a link between them, generally speaking. Nobody can speak as fast as their thoughts go. But in some cases, now, if this link is there, in between, what happens is from thoughts to words, there is a stage of emotions. Thoughts go through emotions to words. Now, when emotions become very strong, when the emotions are very strong, sometimes thoughts at that time, but thoughts, I mean, the word thought has many different meanings. We'll give some thought to the meaning of thought now. But the idea is, then what happens? Words may go very fast and then thought becomes very less. On the other hand, the opposite can also happen, that when the emotions are very strong, that time the thoughts are also running so wide that they just don't get translated into words. Our consciousness gets so caught over there that words can barely come out. Hmm. Some people just sputter in rage at times, or sputter in just can't, no words can come out. So when we're using the word thoughts over here, thoughts can refer to two things. Like we are always full of thoughts, but we are not always thoughtful. So thought can refer at one level to a basic unit of mental activity. If something happens inside us, it's a basic unit of mental activity. So in that sense, thought is the beginning of everything. Ramanujacharya talks about the Prabhupada quotes that thinking, feeling, willing. So in that sense, thought is the basic unit of mental activity. That's where everything starts. But have you given enough thought about this? Have you given enough thought to this? Thought also has another meaning, that is rationally or carefully considered, or rational or careful deliberation. That so some people think before they speak, and some people speak to think, and they talk to think. So now it's just a different way. Introverts, they think before they speak. Extroverts, they think by talking. So that's why if some people don't have someone to talk with, that thoughts start coming. And some people, if you ask them to talk before they have thought through issues, they just feel suffocated by that. I need to think things through first. You give your opinion. Just tell me what is your, or the top of your head. No, I don't want to talk to you. There are different people are different. But the point is that so thought can refer to both of these basic unit of mental activity, and can also refer to rational or careful deliberation. Hmm. So now here, so going back to this, when we're using the word thought, we are here using it in the second sense. That sometimes the thoughts can just start churning so much that we just can't speak. Yeah, emotions are overwhelming us so. So in this case, Bashpa Gadgadaya Gira, that Arjuna is overwhelmed by the thought. And so he's in which case right now? The first or second? Second case. The thoughts of Nirvana, he's struggling to speak. Although he will speak, he'll speak very movingly. So generally, uh, we can't see anybody's mind or heart. But what we can see is what do they speak? Hmm? And not just what do they speak. See, people can put on a facade where what they speak is very different from what is in their hearts. But generally, one of the most reliable pathways to the heart, a glimpse into the heart, comes through the memories of a person. Mhm. So, if we ask someone, have you met XYZ? You were in the same place as that person was there. And immediately that person's face brightens up, their eyes brighten. That means, okay, they like that person, they're attracted, they respect that person. And they say, oh, we met at this time, it's such a nice meeting we had, we did this. You ask someone, immediately their face twists. And oh, obviously, he's a nice person. And you were saying he's a nice person, but the words are saying one thing and the face is saying something else. So basically, we say, oh, yeah, last time it was very bold, not very pleasant. So generally speaking, what is in our heart is seen through our words. But it is not just the words, but especially our memories. Now we can also carefully curate our memories and only speak something good for others. What they say is that if somebody has passed away, then don't spit on the grave of those who have passed away. Unless we'll do that only when they're bitter enemies or something. You know, speak good about whoever is departed. So the idea is that generally, if we have to give a memorial speech about somebody's passed away and then memorial function is happening, we may carefully curate and speak what we want. What should we speak? But still, ultimately, memories bubble from within. So here, when I read this past time, what struck me most, read this many, many times, the Krishna Arjuna relationship with my favorite, the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam also. Arjuna has experienced two devastating shocks only. The two shocks. One is a relational shock. The relational shock is that Krishna has departed. Hmm. And then there is a personal shock. Personal shock is that he failed as an archer. That he who had been undefeated in the Kurukshetra war, where the best warriors had been arrayed on the opposite side, he who had single-handedly survived and penetrated into the Kaurava army and taken down Jayadratha, he who had always been celebrated as the greatest archer in the world, he had been defeated by some unknown infidel coward. Like somebody who's a world tennis champion, and that person is defeated by an unranked player. Nobody knows that person's name also. There can be hardly anything more humiliating for a person than that. More devastating. They say when a top player is defeated by some lower player, they say it's an upset. Why they call it upset? Because the top player gets upset. More than upset. But here, when Arjuna is talking about his memories, there is hardly any reference to the fact that I was defeated. That I was defeated. So his sense of relational loss is far greater than his sense of personal humiliation. So this itself actually shows where his heart lies, where his priorities lie. And that is actually very, very difficult level of consciousness. We all have our sense of identity. See, we all may be souls, but at a functional level, nobody identifies as soul. Because we don't even know what the soul is. I'm Sachitan. What does that mean? So nobody identifies as a soul. We all have functional identities. Our identity, if you look at the way the Bhagavad Gita explains it, is multi-level. So we have functional identity and we have fundamental identity. A functional is in Sanskrit called vyavaharic, the practical, operational. A fundamental is our core identity, our transcendental identity. The fundamental identity is that we are souls. So we have a fundamental identity. But this identity, if we consider only as a soul, it's very difficult to even conceive of that identity. You may say that the soul is qualified as Soham, we say Dasam, that I am a servant of Krishna. But even the idea of being a servant of Krishna is often quite abstract. I'll explain what I mean by this shortly. But we have many functional identities. So our functional identity can be based on our gender, it can be based on our age, it can be based on our profession, it can be based on our nationality, it can be based on our income level, it can be based on our education. So like that, we have many identities. So among all these identities, we may have all these identities that we have. So what happens? All of these are functional identities. Now, when I come to America, One of my main purposes is to tell that we are spiritual beings. But if immigration I say, where are you from? I'm a soul. The immigration authority will say, okay, my sole goal is to get you out of the country. So, at a practical level, we have to function based on our Vyavaharic identity, a practical identity. So now, when we function, see, these are all certain levels of identity. So, somebody will be brahmachari, somebody will be grahastha. We all have all these identities. So, why? So, there is a fundamental identity and there is a functional identity. Now, among the functional identities that we have, it's like, if this is my consciousness, if this is my consciousness, and this is the consciousness of someone I am seeing. Maybe I'm meeting another person as a friend, as acquaintance, as whatever. So now, when I meet that person, I have many roles to play. So, for example, I may be a brahmachari, I may be a middle-aged person, I may be a wow, interesting. I may be an Indian, I may be, I may be an intellectual, I may be a spiritual teacher. There are many roles I am. Now, when the other person sees, often people in their mind, they may focus on one role. So, for example, somebody who sees me, they may see me primarily as an Indian. Because I'm American, they see me as an Indian. Or somebody may see me as, okay, I have physical disability. So, I'm not a physically handicapped person. Somebody may see that, okay, I'm an intellectual. Or I give intellectual classes, so I'm an whatever. So, there is our our social identity and there is our personal identification with an identity. There is this difference. There is we have many identities. There is our social identity. Social identity means how does society see us? So, how many of you here are Asians? Okay. How many of you think of yourself as Asians? Well, before I came to America, first time I came, somebody asked, "Are you an Asian?" I think, yeah, actually, I'm an Asian. Now, Asia is such a big landmass that I can't able to identify Asian. Asia, there are Chinese, there are Japanese, there are Filipino, there are Vietnamese people. It's such a diverse landmass. So we may have an identity, but our identification with that identity might be near zero, isn't it? So are you an Asian? Yeah, I'm an Asian, but I don't think of myself as Asian. If you go India, I'm the Indian. I'm not just an Indian, I'm a South Indian. Not just South Indian, I'm a Telugu, not a Kannada. So what happens? We have there is the social identity that people may see us through. But then apart from that is our personal identification. Personal identification means which is the identity that I identify myself with. The social identity and personal identification. So, depending on what we identify ourselves with, we see the world accordingly. We experience emotions accordingly. So, recently, when this whole thing in Kashmir happened, most of us probably know about it. Many Indians, especially Hindus, are agitated. So, I was talking with one Prabhupada disciple. He is very much based in America, and he strongly feels that ISKCON is becoming very Indianized. ISKCON is becoming very Hinduized. He said that's not what Prabhupada wanted. So he said, I was talking with him. He said that so many people were upset about this, and his opinion was that this shows that the Hindu in devotees is far bigger than the Vaishnava. The Hindu is far bigger than the Prabhupada. not specific Vaishnava. I said, Prabhu, this is, we may differentiate between Hindu and Prabhupada Anuga, but if we had been there, they would have killed us also. That, so you say that this is a matter, or this is the amount of emotion that devotees are experiencing over here, shows how much they are following Prabhupada or how much they are simply identifying with the identity that they grew up with in their family. If we are most of us here grew up as Hindus. So I said, "True, that's a very harsh way of looking at it." So I told him, I tried to explain to him, everybody has their prism through which they look at things. He said that, Prabhupada said, Sarvopadi Vinirmukta, to give up all designations. So we may give up all designation, but the world is not going to give up designation. So so this is again a tension between the Vyavaharik and the Parama. So we may say, now whether devotees over-identify with being a Hindu or with the Indian, that is a separate question. And that could be discussed. But what is important is that we live in a particular world. And in the particular world, people are going to see us in a particular. And we can't deny that. So, for example, in the extreme liberal ideology that people say that, why should anybody be identified by the gender? We are not just men, we are human beings. Well, that is true, but there are, say, predatory men. And if a woman is going on alone, the men say that she's vulnerable, she will be attacked. Now, we may say you should live in a society where everybody is protected. That is true. But there is a real world. And in the real world, people, there's a predatory male. That male is not going to say this is a human being. Going to say this is a fellow human being. This is a woman that I can exploit. If she's alone, I'll exploit her. So the point is, we cannot deny how society sees us. And now, of course, we may or may not want to identify that. And that's something which is to be considered. But I am trying to highlight this difference between social identity and personal identification. Hmm? Personal identity. We take a group of every year, take a group of American yoga students to India for a tour, and mostly the yoga students there are women and some men also. But anyway, we were talking after on tour that I asked the people for the feedback, and the one American lady, she gave very interesting feedback. She said that I was introduced to this Bhakti philosophy, the Gita philosophy, and that's why I wanted to go to India. This was the Gita philosophy that I learned that I'm not the body, so I'm not a woman. But he said, when I went to the land of the Bhagavad Gita, which is India, that is where every turn I was constantly reminded I'm a woman. So I was never more conscious that I was a woman than when I was trying to follow the Bhagavad. So now what happens is, it is true, unfortunately. So there is, now Prabhupada also acknowledged this, that in the West, men and women go up in a particular way. So many of the roles that men play, women also play. And of course, the differentiation is there. But it may not be that much. But, so there is a personal identity and there is a social identification. We could say same way, we may not be so conscious that we are Indians till we come to America. And we are constantly conscious that we are Indians because people say, hey, we are Indians, but it's just something we take for granted. But then we become aware of it. So there is the personal identity and the social identification. So why are we talking about this? And this, what we many times we misunderstood. I'm thinking in a particular way, others are thinking very differently. Others are expecting us to behave in a particular way and we have to act in a particular way. Now that could just be a misunderstanding, but it could also be a differing identification of roles. I may identify myself in a particular way, and somebody else may identify myself in a different way. And then based on the role that people identify us with, they will have a certain set of expectations. And based on how we identify ourselves, we may have a certain set of aspirations. This is what I would like to do, but this is what you are expected to do. So that's where a lot of tension comes in. So based on our personal identification come our aspirations. Hmm. What we would like to do. Hmm. Based on our social identity come the expectations from us. So now this tension between what people expect from us and what we aspire, this tension is often a cause of lot of mental angst, a lot of mental angst. So, for example, when we are playing a particular role, say we, for example, somebody is a manager. Now, for them, they have to manage the. That means they have to make sure that the whole project is going on properly. That the basic requirements for functioning temple are taken care of. Now, but suppose somebody is new come to the temple and now they expect a very warm, loving environment, very kind environment. And then if they see that the manager is very functional, okay, you do this, you do that, you do that, then what happens is now maybe they are expecting the manager to be a mentor. But the manager may be a mentor, but the manager may primarily identify as a mentor. No, sorry, primarily identify as a manager and not as a. Now, being a manager, being a mentor, both are services. But what may happen is the every individual may identify differently. So the manager identifies primarily as a manager and secondly as a mentor. Take care of the project, now take care of the devotees. So the devotees say, you should take care of devotees. Like sometimes you put projects before people or people before projects. Well, that always tension will be there. But the thing is that everybody functions in a particular way. In their mind, they function in a particular way. So if they identify, okay, I will take care of the project, for that sake, I'll sacrifice one person. Now, if you see there are opposite values over here, what Vidura talks about, say, and what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu talks. So Vidura is speaking as a Kshatriya. And a Kshatriya is a very pragmatic person. So what Vidura says is, for the sake of the family, one member can be sacrificed. For the sake of a village, one family can be sacrificed. For the sake of a kingdom, one village can be sacrificed. And this is brutal in one sense. Why should that member be sacrificed? Why should that village be sacrificed? But for the larger good, things can be sacrificed. Now that is Vidura's statement. Now what does Chaitanya Mahaprabhu say? Is one devotee is more important than the whole material existence. Now, Mahaprabhu is not the manager of institution. The Mahaprabhu is speaking from more of a Brahminical or a Vaishnava stage. Now, which is more important? Can we sacrifice the whole institution for one devotee? No, practically we cannot. That just now, yesterday I was talking to one devotee, one place where one Muslim girl became a devotee. And she started coming and living in the temple. And initially devotees were very happy. The Hinduism is very proud. Oh, a Muslim girl has become a devotee. But then that whole community came and started doing the temple said, "We will burn the temple down if you don't let the devotee go back." And then they talk with the leaders and they say, okay, tell her that she'll practice bhakti privately, but she has to go back. And then this devotee who had cultivated her, and that she felt betrayed. And, I gave up my entire family for you, and now you are giving me up. Now, what do we do at such a time? It's not an easy decision, isn't it? Can we sacrifice? Can we risk the entire project for one devotee? Well, we may say there are some hundreds of devotees who are coming there. It's not just risking the project, to risking the life of 100 devotees, hundreds of devotees. Now we say, oh, you should stand for principles. You'll be protected. Then yes, but we also have to stand using our intelligence. How do we function? So there are certain battles we can fight, certain battles we can't fight. My point again is that what we identify with may be often different from what people may identify as. And this causes a lot of tension. So now in this case, we're discussing this particular pastime, and Arjuna, what he identifies with Arjuna is known as a celebrated archer. But throughout his memories, not once does he mention or express angst that I, my archer, I'm no longer a good archer. I failed as an archer. He is only remembering how Krishna loved him, how Krishna was kind to him, how Krishna, how he had such extraordinary experiences with Krishna. So in his own head space, or you can say in his heart space, the identification with the archery is not very high, which is remarkable. He had worked extremely hard to be an archer. He had, he had endeavored tirelessly while he was in the Gurukul. And even among the Pandavas, living in forest is difficult. We could say that itself is an austerity for those who are used to living in royalty. But even among the Pandavas, Arjuna had performed special austerity when he had gone to the Himalayas to gain further celestial weapons. So he had worked very hard to acquire that particular skill to the level of not just excellence, in Prabhupada's word, super excellence. There is no such word as super excellence in English. Prabhupada coined that word, and it is quite standard use in that word. So, so basically, Arjuna was the best archer, and yet, despite having that identity, that role, he did not identify with that. And that's why his sense of loss is that I have lost Krishna. That Krishna who was so kind to me, that Krishna who did so much for us, that Krishna is no longer with us. So his memories will be revealed in his subsequent words. But right now, before that, Vyasadeva, specifically here, Shukadeva Goswami is speaking, Vyasadeva is writing. He's Sutta Goswami is speaking. Sutta Goswami is telling us what was Arjuna's consciousness. And for all of us, when we experience certain emotional upheavals, certain ups and downs, we can't deny that pain. We can't deny those emotions. To say that we should not feel any emotions, that is just dehumanizing ourselves. We have certain roles to play in our life, and in those roles, we will experience certain emotions. But the intensity of the emotions, the severity of the emotions, the specificity of the emotions, that can reveal to us our own psychology. Okay, what is it that I identify with so much? So different devotees within bhakti also identify with different things. And it's not a wrong thing. It's just that that means maybe our connection with Krishna is primarily through that particular activity. So for us, our emotions, sometimes when our emotions become too strong, mm, now one option is that we try to control the emotions. And that we need to do. We don't want our emotions to control us and control our actions. But another equally important approach is curiosity. That, okay, what exactly about this is triggering so much emotion? If I am feeling very hurt, if somebody spoke something and hurt me, so, okay, what exactly hurt? Was it the words themselves? Was it that this person spoke those words? Or was it that this person spoke those words in public? So each of those could mean different things. That the words themselves hurt us. That means maybe we are very sensitive to words. Different people have different love languages. For some people, their love language is words. The words themselves hurt us. Specifically, that person spoke those words. Maybe that relationship is very important. And if somebody else has spoken those words, that word will not happen. How could you think like this about? Now, that day those words are spoken in public means maybe it is the perception in the community that's very important. And that's why I'm feeling hurt. So now each of these can help us understand ourselves. So as I said, it's a starting point. For us, we philosophically understand we are so. At the same time, we psychologically will identify with a particular role and we will function accordingly in that. So, now which role do I identify with? Hmm? Understanding that will also help us to serve better, to avoid pitfalls in our service. And that's why when strong emotions overwhelm us, we can approach them not just through the dynamic of control. Oh, I'm so attached, I'm feeling so emotional. Or people are so insensitive. How can they do that? We could just go through the dynamic of trying to control it or not control it, but we can also approach it through the prism of curiosity. Try to understand what is it that is triggering so much emotion. And that way we can understand more about ourselves, more about how our soul is functioning through our body mind machine at this particular time. And by looking at what Arjuna is expressing emotion about, we are seeing what Arjuna is primarily identifying. So I can put it on the incident of Prabhupada. That there was one godbrother of Prabhupada. When Prabhupada came to America, it could have been very easy for him to come with a lot of feeling of bitterness because he had been trying to share Krishna Bhakti in India vigorously and it had not been successful. And when you're not successful in something, say if we go for a program and nobody comes for the program, or a few people come for the program, that's disappointing. But when we go for a program, we just say, okay, can I take this vehicle? Can I get some prasad? Can I get a sound system? No, you have to get everything else. So those who are expected to support us, they don't support us. Then that may hurt us even more. Okay, if people don't come, we can't come. But you are supposed to be my family, you're supposed to be my community. How can you not help? So Srila Prabhupada did not get any help from much of his God family. Even when he went to America, he came to America. He just asked one of his God brothers, I have a donor in India. The donor will give money. But the Indian government just has to clear the foreign exchange. India was very regulated at that. So can you just talk with the Indian, this God brother had a good relationship with the Indian president at that time. Can you talk with the president? And the God brother didn't even bother to reply. It was just, he replied through his servant. It will not be possible to help. The Prabhupada could have been, yet when Prabhupada came back to India, he in 1970s he came back. He introduced his disciples to his God. See, it's natural for Prabhupada. This is his family in one sense. So he has these are all representatives of his spiritual master, and many of them have had much closer association with spiritual master than what he had. So that he has preached, and Western people have become devotees. He brings them and introduces them to his God brothers. And one particular God brother, what happened? He started poisoning his disciples. And he said, no, your guru, he didn't have much association with his guru. He really doesn't do much. He was mostly a grasta. He barely met his spiritual master also. Just a dozen times, less than a dozen times. I was sannyasi from my, I have studied Sanskrit, I have studied this. I can tell you much more about Krishna. I can take you much further in this. And some devotees got deviated by it. Some devotees became a devotee to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada spoke at such times very strongly. That person is an envious snake. And no one should associate with that. It's a very strong statement to make about one's own God, brother. To call somebody an envious snake. And now Prabhupada made certain statements, but then later, when that godbrother passed away, the devotees came and asked, where did he go? The devotees like to speculate about the destination of those they oppose. They say, which hell did he go to? And Prabhupada was very grave. And Prabhupada said, he went back to Kotak. He said, my spiritual master is very powerful, and he served my spiritual master like that. My spiritual master took me back. So here, what is happening is, when Srila Prabhupada is looking at his God brother role, so there are two different roles. One role is One role is he's himself a guru, and as a guru, he's a protector of his disciples. And he wants to make sure that he plays that role very well. Hmm? But Srila Prabhupada, although he took that role very seriously, he did not let that role cloud his bigger vision. He was also himself a disciple. And as a disciple, he focused on his spiritual master. And he focused on his spiritual master's. So at a particular time when disciples were being protected, he spoke strongly against this particular God. But when that person had departed, because he's a disciple, I'm a disciple. And he focused on the fact that this person is, we have the same spiritual master. And my spiritual master is powerful. So Prabhupada had a role as a guru. We don't think of Prabhupada as playing the role of a disciple. He identified himself. I'm a disciple, he's a disciple. The spiritual master is very powerful. So we need to be able to identify with proper roles at proper times. And that's how we will be able to function in life. So service attitude means not just, okay, we speak, oh, how can I serve you? It's all, whatever. But the point is, we also need, what is the role that I am playing over here? And how can I play that role then? So that is what service attitude is. Arjuna says to Krishna, Karishye Vachanam. He says, Krishna, I'll serve you. But how will he serve him? Arjuna says, Krishna, you want me to serve as a Kshatriya? I will serve you. I'll show you as a warrior. So, service attitude or seva bhav, what it means is that there is a situationally appropriate role that we play. Each one of us will have to play a role according to, we need to be able to identify, okay, what is the role I'm expected to play over here? And we play that role. That level of capacity to detach ourselves from what we primarily identify ourselves with and identify ourselves in a different way so that we can play that role. That is the expression of our service attitude. So Arjuna is able to identify primarily Krishna as a friend, Krishna as my Lord, Krishna as the closest person. And in his own consciousness, that I'm an archer, that I'm a failed archer, is not occupying any headspace. What is occupying headspaces or heart spaces? That I have lost Krishna. And even in his loss, his exalted level of devotion is being seen. So I'll summarize what I discussed today. We're discussing about Arjuna's memories, and a broad topic we will discuss today and tomorrow is about finding strength in difficult situations in hard times. So the first point, based on this particular passage that we discussed, is how Arjuna's, when we look at, you want to know a person's character, we can look at their words. The character is known through words, but specifically, which words? The words that express their memories. Our memories are the closest glimpse, or somebody the closest glimpse that we can get to their heart, who they remember. And they talked about how we have our thoughts and we have our words. And in between are our emotions. So when the emotions are strong, two things can happen. When the emotions are strong, sometimes what can happen is the thoughts become very strong and the words are left far behind. Or sometimes the thought becomes very weak and the words become very strong. Then somebody goes short tempered, they just go off, blow off. But the point is, when our emotions come up, we talk about how we have our identity, we have a fundamental identity or paramarthik identity. That is, we are souls. But beyond that, we have many functional identities based on our gender, based on nationality, based on our age, based on education, profession. This is our Vyavaharik identity. And even if we are serving Krishna, we may identify with a particular identity more. So how I identify myself and how others see me. There's distinction between my social identity, how I'm seen by others, and my personal identification. So from my personal identification will come my aspirations, what I want to do, what I seek to do. Mm. Our dreams, our aspirations, they come from here. And from a social identity comes our expectations, what we are meant to do, what we are called upon to do. Now, this can lead to tension. So then, rather than simply saying that, okay, this person is demanding too much from me, or this person is just not being responsible, we need to try to understand where is this mismatch, where is this conflict. And then we discuss this how Arjuna, for him, his identification as an archer. So we talk about situationally appropriate or revealed identification. So depending on which particular role we are playing, we need to be able to identify accordingly. Identification is required. So for example, here Arjuna is identifying much more with, with Krishna's absence than with archery failure. That shows that he doesn't identify as an archer so much. Although that has been a very important service to Krishna. And this was Vishnu Prabhupada's example. At a particular time, he identified as a guru, he wanted to protect his disciple. Another time, he identified himself as a disciple. And there he focused on respecting his guru and respecting the God brother as a disciple of his guru. So, for all of us, service attitude means we consider which is the role I'm meant to play over here and how best can I play that role. Whenever we have emotions coming up, rather than looking at emotions simply from the prism of control, this person is out of control, this person is in control, you can try to see the emotions from the perspective of you yourself. That way we can understand where we are going, what we are identifying with, and what roles we are most likely able to play more naturally than others. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments?
Very wonderful class. Just one point, last point you said that is self. We can or self analysis. We can do that from where these emotions are coming. What is my identification? So when we see certain kind of emotional pattern of other person, so curiosity could be that what could be his identification. When that range also should be getting to that from where his what is his identification, how to help the person. So does this also approach okay?
Yeah, naturally. So if you want to serve someone, you want to take care of someone. If you want to they serve because they're junior to us or serve as superior. So it depends on what they identify with. Going back to this, I have a separate session on this. I don't know how many devotees feel as if they're not cared for in the community. So broadly, what happens is the movement, the Krishna consciousness movement. Some people see it as a home. Some people see it as an office. Now, like I talked about home. Now, in home and office, both places, there are relationships and there are tasks, there are projects. Don't use the word project, these are tasks to be done. Now, what happens is, in an office, relationships are important, no doubt. But in an office, tasks are much more important. Isn't it? If you don't do the task, I can be your friend, but I'm going to fire you. In a home, if you can't do the task, okay, you do what you can, we'll cover it. So what happens is that for different devotees, in our movement, broadly there are two kinds of people, two broad kinds of people. There are community builders and there are project builders. Now, project builders are mostly concerned with infrastructure projects. So for them, the tasks are more important than relationships. And for those who are community builders, the relationships are more important than tasks. And these two are very different profiles. So now some devotee may not feel cared for It is not that the devotee, they don't care. Now, sometimes some people may feel that the movement is like a university. Hmm? This is a completely different identity. University means you should study Shastra. You should teach, you should teach Shastra. You should focus on scripture. And somebody say, okay, what to build a big project. But neglect is scripture study. Right? So it depends. So are we a university? Yes, we are. Are we a home? We are meant to be a home. So are we offices? Of course, there's a lot of service to be done. So what happens is like-minded devotee association means that we need to see how that devotee primarily identifies with the movement or identifies the movement. How do they see the movement? So if somebody who sees the movement primarily as a university associates with somebody who primarily sees as a home. Now in home we do a lot of small talks. Okay, how are you? What is going on with your family? And what is this happening? How is it? Now in the university, it's not that your professor is your counselor. Is it? It's not just between office and home. University and home also there's a difference. So some people they say that's so philosophical. They just give a lot of they're not identifying with that at all. So our when Prabhupada said our house is our movement is Prabhupada, he said about Prabhupada. He built a house in which the whole world can live. So what that means is that not everybody can live in any room. In the house there are different rooms. Each room will have its own value system. Some rooms will be more like offices, some rooms will be more like homes, some rooms will be more like universities. So we need to find out which is the room in which we can belong the best. That does not mean physically or technologically. It can also be emotionally identified with that room. So many times when something bad happens in this home, something this happened over here and that happened over here. So in the past I used to defend, I said, no, I tell them this is the ISKCON that I joined. The ISKCON that I joined is that where I study the Bhagavad Gita, I share the Bhagavad Gita. That is what inspired me, and I look for the people who have similar values. So don't identify with the whole institution. But the institution is a huge thing. And then, of course, publicly, the social identification will be there. We will be seen just by address and just content. This is true. This is personal identification minus this is my ISKCON. This is why I am here. Now, are there other things in ISKCON? Yes. Now, am I concerned about them? Not much I can do. It is the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. It is not the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. It is not a Krishna consciousness automatically. It is Krishna consciousness has to be consciously cultivated. So I am coming here to cultivate Krishna consciousness. And I will focus on associating with those devotees who are also cultivating Krishna consciousness in a way that works with me, in a way that is inspiring. So that differentiation between for and off is very important for devotees who feel frustrated or disheartened or abandoned. It's not that automatically you get Krishna consciousness. It is for Krishna consciousness. This is going to provide us resources to cultivate Krishna. Is it a home? Yes, but it's not just a home. It is a home that's going to take us toward Krishna, which is our ultimate. Is it a university? Yes, it is a university. But then somebody will say, it's a university, you have so many random classes going on. Where's the syllabus? Where's the structure? Where's the curriculum? It's not just a university. It is for cultivating Krishna consciousness. Does that answer your question? Any other questions or comments?
Thank you so much for the wonderful class. I was wondering, so what you have been explaining this morning, I was thinking that it's also required that we, or at least the assumption is that we are surrounded by people who have a high EQ, a high emotional quotient, right? To understand this and so that the relationship don't get extremely transactional. But sometimes we know that not everybody really thinks like that because it's a very fast culture, especially in science. Then how do we make sure that we don't create troubles or mental agitation to somebody else who might not be really sitting and thinking of all this?
So we associate those who are thinking of these things. That's why like-minded association is important. Association is good to have of devotees, but within that, over a period of time, there's where one you need to find like-minded associates. So basically, I use three criteria to understand what is like-minded association. Is is like-minded means that first thing is, if it's not just like-minded association, like-minded friends, also like-minded guides that we need. So we understand when they speak. Some devotees may give classes and they just click, speaks. Some devotees speak and okay, nice topic. I'm not persuaded by it. So we come from a particular place, we understand. And then, or rather, let's become more specific, we understand the way their mind works. Because ultimately, our mind is a tool which we use for thinking and function. We understand their mind. Then, if we get a opportunity close to them, then they understand our mind. They understand how we think, how we function. Otherwise, they don't understand our mind, they just reduce us to convenient views. You are into analytical, you are into sentimental, you are into judgmental, you are into this, to that. So they will reduce us to a very convenient or reductionistic level. And that's how they are seen. Okay. They don't understand where I'm coming. So they understand our mind. So when I was growing up in Bhakti, I used to ask a lot of questions. And the questions and curiosity is what drives my spiritual life. So I asked one particular devotee, and then devotee told me, I think Chaityana Charan, you have forgotten that there is Bhakti Marg, not in Jnana. I was a little taken aback by that. I was a little shocked. But then I thought about it. I met with other devotees. And then I realized it was my mistake. That devotee is not a very analytical person. So I should not be asking questions to that devotee. Because it's not like me. Are there devotees who are also analytical? Just because somebody is analytical and intellectual, does that mean they don't have a place in Bhakti Marg? Not like that. So we have to find out like-minded association. So they understand our mind. And most importantly is they help us understand our mind. It is that, okay, you're thinking in this way, and to this point, it is right. This is where we will be overlooking certain things. So then, if you can find one person like this in our life, it's a great blessing. Yes, but tell me when to stop. Yeah.
I wanted to ask that how can we strengthen the empathic relationship with the Lord?
We can't. We can't. The Paramatma, there is no way we can connect with. We live in the material world and we function through the material world and going towards Krishna. So it is, every devotee will identify as a preacher or as a pujari or as a manager or as a mentor. Okay, I'm a devotee. I'm a devotee independent of my roles. It is true, but it's very difficult at our level to connect like that. I think trying like that itself will actually damage our devotion, impede our devotion. So it is, in our philosophy, this world is also real. And so basically, if this world is, if this is the spiritual world, so if this is the spiritual world, this is the material world. And we are here. It's very difficult to go like this. Most of us will go like this. It's not that we leave the world and go to Krishna. It is through the world we go. Even if somebody becomes a brahmachari or sannyasi, still they have to spend the rest of their life in this world. And they have to find out how I'm going to serve Krishna. So, now, yes, ultimately, we have to put aside all our roles and simply remember Krishna. At the last moment of our life, we are not preachers, we are not mentors, we are not managers. We are simply souls who want to remember Krishna. But right now, to do that is very difficult. What are we going to do? We want to forget all our roles and go to Vrindavan, chant 64 rounds? Well, there we are identifying ourselves as Babaji. Now, are we capable of doing that? Very few of us. So rather than worrying about whether I'm only identifying with my ultimate identity, my focus can be on, is my current identity being directed toward the service of Krishna? See, Krishna himself, when he tells Arjuna, Dehi no sunyatha, That is the Paramatmika identity. But in the very next verse, what is the next verse? Matra Sparshastu Kaunteya. He just told him you are the soul, immediately identifying himself, identifying Arjuna with his mother. Why do that? Not just once. Tam Sitikshasva Bharat. So in the next verse, after giving the Paramatmika identity, twice Krishna uses the verb Vyavaharika identity. Why? Because Prabhupada explained the purport that the Vyavaharik identity can be used as the inspiration to focus on the Paramatmika goal. That you belong to a great, you are come from, born to a great mother, you belong to a great dynasty. Therefore, you should act in a great way, even if there is difficulty. Okay? Yes, please.
Thank you, Prabhu. This was such a wonderful class, very enlightening. So, Prabhu, you drew that diagram where you were showing among the functional identities, we have many of them. And different people see different aspects of our functional identity. So, how do we identify that sometimes when we focus too much on certain aspects of our functional identity, it can lead to inferiority complex, or say somebody has a flaw and he knows he has that flaw and he focuses on it, and even the world knows he has that flaw. But if he himself is also focused too much on that flaw or on that particular identity which he is weak at, then he may go into inferiority complex. How do we identify which of our functional identities we should focus on so that we can
see? Every culture has its strengths and its weaknesses. So, for example, if you're in Indian culture, at least this was before 5 to 10 years ago, if you are not an engineer or a doctor, then you are a failure and a loser. It was like that. That's what everybody should do that. Now things are changing slightly. So, like that, within the ISKCON culture, if you are not a preacher, if you are not a kirtanier, if you are not a fundraiser, if you are not a manager, maybe if you are not a pujari, right? There are few services which are highly glamorized. And by preacher, it means especially you just get, not just that you do good classroom, it's also that you get people to come. You make people devotees. If you're not doing any of these things, then what are you doing with them? That's what it comes out to. So every culture has its limitations. And so we have to find out like-minded association. If I am not a fundraiser, and if I surround myself with people of fundraisers, naturally I'll feel insecure and inferior. So like-minded association is not just something optional thing. A lot of devotees feel insecure and dissatisfied, and if we are not getting higher taste, actually higher taste is very difficult. What we are not getting is a service that is compatible and association that is, and because of that we don't feel that we're not getting higher taste. So each one of us has to find out which role would, first of all, can I play nicely, and which role can is going to be supported. There's always going to be tension between the individual and the institution. But then we have to find out a reasonable reconciliation, a reasonable harmonization between them. So there are some roles which need to play because we are part of a community or institution, and there are some roles which we feel naturally drawn to this play. So yes, it is true that if there are certain roles we focus on, especially if we strongly seek to do something which we're just not able to do, then that will lead us to a lot of frustration. Okay, accept. I don't have to do everything. See, so sometimes there's so much focus on don't have ego. And what is the opposite of ego? Okay. Humility. True ego. Okay. When I ask the question, you're thinking of ego answer. No? Normally, you would say this ego versus humility. It's not that simple actually. It's a pendulum. It's not anything. One side is ego. The other side is insecurity. And in between is humility. So ego is basically I can do everything. I can do everything, I am everything, I am God. That is Maya. Insecurity is I can do nothing, I am nothing. That is Shunya. Prabhupada came to rescue us from both. I said Nirvishesha, Shunya, both. So humility is Mamai Show Jivan. I am something. I can do some things. So let me find out the things that I can do and let me do them. And so we ourselves need to psychologically accept that first. And then we need a social environment where what we are doing is also valued. It may not be glorified, it may not be glamorous, and that we can't change. What will be glorified and glamorized in a particular culture, that we won't be able to change. But other things should at least be valued and appreciated. And we need to have that in a supportive association. Last question. Yeah.
Probably, as you said earlier, on a spiritual level, we are watching Mars. But at the practical and functional level, we identify with many attributes like religion, religion, and so on and so forth. So when the store was black, then how do we identify? Like you said earlier, there was an example of Pahalgam, one of the devotee. So what was your answer?
So it depends. I would say that. See, uh, the as the Krishna conscious movement is very large, and we cannot expect, say, American devotees to identify with Indian concerns as much as Indians will identify. So those who did not come from a Hindu background may not identify with Hindu concerns as much as those who are from a Hindu background. Although, if somebody might be non-Hindu, but if they are wearing particular clothes, they will be seen as Hindu, and they may also be lynched. Who knows? So the thing is that we have to see what is the role we are playing, and accordingly we move to the new. So depending on the the background we have come from, we naturally identify with particulars. We can't deny that. But then how much can that role be furthered in the place where we are? Some people say, okay, this role cannot be, I cannot play this role right now. So I'll not focus on this. So some devotees, this was a big meeting we had online. No, rather within the community also as well elsewhere. That there are a lot of provocative messages going on social media about this community like this and this is like that and like that. So what was told was that if somebody wants to post something like this on your social media handles, post it, but don't post it with your disconnected. Now, because everyone is being a problem. You know, this is the truth we should be speaking. The point is that ISKCON has a particular purpose. Now, Prabhupada did not establish ISKCON to spread Hindutva. But spreading Hindutva, is it important? You could say it is important. You're not against Hindutva in any way. But that is not the purpose of it. We have branches in various parts of it. And we have to think of the bigger purpose. So now can individual devotees be activists or campaigners in this area? They can be. Individuals can be. But then they should not highlight their own identity. So can an ISKCON devotee have a role beyond being an ISKCON devotee? Of course. The ISKCON devotee is also one Vyavaharik identity. It's meant to take us towards our Paramathik identity. It is a Vyavaharik identity. I mean, I don't want to, if somebody wants to go to some particular morcha or this or that, whatever, if you want to go, you can go. But don't go at this point. In New Zealand, it happened. See, devotees, depending on situations, identify with a lot of causes. So when the pandemic was going on, the whole, especially the Western world, I said much more in India, and this whole vaccines they are a conspiracy. You're forced to take vaccines. Huge anti-vaccine. So it happened in New Zealand that there were devotees. See, many times what happens is that the kind of Westerners we attract are mostly anti-establishment kind of Westerners, more or less left liberal kind of believing people. And many of the devotees who, for Western people who come to Bhakti, it's like astrology, reincarnation, tarot reading, palmistry, all of them are one part of an alternative belief system and they're exploring all. So so many devotees are strongly anti-vaccine, especially among the non-Indian community. So what happened was that these devotees, there was a big anti. New Zealand had one of the strongest like regimes about uh, social distancing and all that, very rigid it is. So there are people who protested against it. And there were some devotees who said that they will go and do Kirtan and this anti-vax campaign and they will distribute free food to everyone. And they went as devotees. And now what happened? It's like in the public mind, in the government's eye, we start being identified as a part of the anti-vax movement. And we start being identified as uh, not only participating but supporting and promoting it. So our leaders told that you can do that if you want, nobody's stopping you. But don't go there in devotee. Don't chant Hare Krishna. No, Hare Krishna mantra is not your property. You're going to chant. So then, actually, our movement had to put out a public statement, and these don't represent us. So now, it is not a very comfortable situation. We don't want to disown devotees. That is not devotees are chanting Hare Krishna. But then, the point is, Hare Krishna chanting at a particular point sends a particular message. So, as devotees, we can play certain roles, but then we don't have to identify ourselves primarily as devotees when we play. At least in the public eye, we should identify. Is that okay? So there are many places where somebody comes and asks me to support a particular cause. I may believe that cause. But then I say I represent a particular institution. So I'll support this cause, but I'll sign it, I'll sign it by legal. I'm not going to sign my spiritual. So we may have to create that differentiation. It's not that what we support, we have to reject all of it. But we have to recognize that we are a part of something bigger and that will give some facility, but also give some constraints. Okay. So thank you very much. Yantra Shri Bhagavatam ki. Prabhupada ki.
Warm welcome and gratitude to our great Chaityana Charan Prabhu. So today we will be having the next the second session on the Gita for CEOs.